Hey everyone, this is George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovators Mindset Podcast. A solo episode, and I know these come out every week at the same time, and I'm very meticulous about that, but I haven't sat down and recorded one in a little while. I've been presenting several places, and I just want to be honest with you that sometimes I just struggle to share my ideas. I share my thinking, share what's going on, and I think a lot of times when you see people that are doing podcasts, or posting videos, we think it's so easy, but I think sometimes it's just really hard. And it's not that I don't necessarily have anything to say. I'm just having trouble saying it maybe. So hopefully this comes off well, but I just want to share that little, some of the insecurity and self-doubt that you have, even as someone who speaks all over the world. Yeah, sometimes I just have trouble getting on this camera and sharing to you some ideas. But I did want to share something that I just presented on. I was actually at Learning the Brain in San Francisco. It's a wonderful conference. I've done it several times, and very academic group. But they were talking, and I shouldn't say but, they were talking about AI and really how to leverage this. And I was blessed to be the keynote in San Francisco on Saturday. And the title of the talk was Bridging the Gap, Aligning AI, Educational Fundamentals, and Collaborative Culture in Schools. So when I was doing this talk, the focus is really kind of this connection between my book, The Innovator's Mindset, and the idea of Forward Together, but really kind of building the bridge between the ideas of building on the foundational skills that every single child should have, as well as how do we bring community together to not just buy into these ideas, but to create them, to actually build that ownership. We often talk about this idea, we need to share our stories, but I don't think that's really is important as who creates the stories. Because if I'm sharing a story that you want no part of, then it doesn't really matter. But if I actually am creating a story with you and then we share it together, there's so much more ownership over the process. So I had a wonderful talk, very well received, and that always makes me feel good because it's very new. I think I've maybe done it, an iteration of it once before, and you try to like share some ideas, tweak things, because other groups will ask you to come and speak to it later. And one of the things that I talked about in the newsletter that I'm discussing today is this idea that AI everything. And if you go on LinkedIn, it's AI. If you go on Twitter, it's like we hate technology and there should be no technology in schools. And it's kind of an interesting intersection that it's so extreme, but I think the answers are in the middle. But I did share this in my book, Forward Together. When I hear people say the number one thing employers are looking for is people with AI literacy, my first thought is not if they can't read and write, foundational to aspirational. So that is something I've really been thinking about quite a bit. We talk about all of these things that we want to achieve with our kids, how our kids can change the world, but it has to be a strong foundation that you're building on. The analogy that I've used forever is the idea, if you know the best jazz musicians, and I know a little bit about jazz. I'm a big music fan. The best jazz musicians have the ability to improvise. But why do they have the ability to improvise? Is because they know the basics inside out. They didn't just pick up a trumpet and start doing stuff. They know the basics that they can build on it. And it's the same with great teachers. The best teachers I know their content inside out, and they can adjust things based on the students they have. If you don't understand your content, when you have students that struggle, it's really hard to connect. And I think that's something that really matters. That foundational baseline has to be created, but toward an aspirational focus. Now, I'm not going to talk about that talk that much, and not because it's not something I don't want to discuss, but I wanted to share some things that are really important in how I delivered the talk. At that conference, there are so many incredible speakers, and many of them I have known for years. And so I have this opportunity to keynote the conference, to kind of kick it off. And one of my goals when I keynote a conference is, how do I ensure that everyone else's session is better after my talk? People walk out of there and they are excited to learn. That is so crucial. But also, I want people to understand I'm just still learning stuff. I'm trying to figure things out. I'm an avid learner, but I don't consider myself an expert in anything. And I think as soon as you start to deem yourself as the expert, I was reading a post from a friend of mine, and he was talking about this notion of educational influencers or thought leaders. I hope no one calls himself a thought leader. I think that's something other people should determine if you reference yourself as a thought leader. I don't know. That's just super weird. So I just kind of pride myself on someone who learns and really kind of jumps in, figures some of this stuff out. This podcast started because I wanted to kind of figure out what would podcasting do for kids. Like if you started doing this, and the only way you can really figure that out is if you do it yourself. And that to me is a really important aspect, is kind of going through the process. So there were some really incredible minds. And I will say thought leaders, that they are incredible, brilliant minds in the space of educational technology, artificial intelligence. So here I am speaking at the keynote. So one of the first things I share is that really my goal is not to tell you what to do. And it's funny because how people often judge keynotes, and I talk about this in Forward Together, what I call the teacher paradox. We share this idea that, do you give me a bunch of stuff I can do the next day with my staff, with my students, right? That's, if you give me practical ideas I can do the next day, then you're good. And the teacher paradox is this. Do you know any group of people in the world who want to be told exactly what to do the next day, who also hate being told what to do other than educators, right? It's like, tell me exactly what to do, but don't you dare tell me what to do. So I bring that up in the conference, and it's kind of like, it's a joke, but it's true. It's funny because it is true. The hope is to kind of understand the expert is sitting all around you in that space, and we need to learn from each other as well. But I also encourage them to check out some of these brilliant thought leaders. And I shared a slide, one of my very first slides, saying it's so blessed to have these people speak at the conference. The notion of why I do that is because the spotlight is on me. All eyes are on me at the front of that room when I'm speaking. And the thing that I can do best in that moment is turn that spotlight to other people. And it's not just about the presenters, it's about the people in the audience. I mentioned people that I had conversations with before I even started, and some of the things I took away from talking to them. I think it really shows that you're in the room and you're really present, but you also value the contributions of others. It's not just about you, it's about all of us getting better, including myself as the speaker. So immediately when you do that, I've never had a feeling like, oh, I shouldn't have done that because now I look dumb. I think it actually gives me more credibility because people know that I look at other people's stuff, that I'm trying to learn from others as well. It's not just about what I know, it's me trying to learn from other people through the process. So that idea of turning the spotlight into others is something that's not just about speaking, it can be at different levels. So I wrote this newsletter, and I'll share the link down below. And I talk about some of the ideas that I connect with. And this is the quote from the book that inspired this newsletter from Forward Together. When you have the spotlight shining on you as a leader, the best thing you do is turn it around to shine that light onto others. So here's like 3 ways in my career I've taken that spotlight and benefited from people being shining on others. So the first one I talked about is actually from the innovator's mindset, is how I turn spotlight on the students. When I was teaching, and I think this is actually when I was an assistant principal, and if you've taught long enough, probably everyone had this experience as well. Your administrators put you in a position where you're teaching the stuff that you know best, right? That you have the expertise in, you're great at. No principal ever put me to teach a science class because it's not a good idea. So it was a lot based on what I learned in college, or what my areas of focus were. But that being said, sometimes there's just these classes that are thrown at you because no one else, it just doesn't fit a schedule. There's some weird thing, and you just kind of got to do it, right? And so one year, and this was actually when I was an assistant principal, there was this like weird extra class, and it was only a couple classes a week, but I had to teach a health class, and I was okay with doing it because assistant principal at the time, I was teaching and being a school administrator at the time, so I was okay doing it because it wasn't just going to work with anyone else's schedule, and I could have done it, and it was something that was easy enough for me to fit in. That being said, health was not something that I trained to teach. And, I looked at the curriculum. I'm like, yeah, I understand some of the stuff, but this is not my area. This is just not my area. So I felt really uncomfortable doing that. And as much as I know how important it is to still kind of be in the classroom when you're an administrator, it's really hard to teach. And I know people get really bothered by this when you say something like this, because when you're an administrator, your job is to really kind of help everyone, to serve students. And you get pulled in so many different directions that sometimes you get pulled out of your class and the students that are in the class actually get hurt from the process. So I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes that's what happens. And it is something that can be tough, but I do really think it's powerful to teach. And so I'm teaching this I have to teach this health class, just for the sake of the school. And honestly, I don't want to teach it. So I'm being honest with you. So when I talk about innovation, sometimes the most innovative ideas I've had are basically just out of sheer laziness. Like there's got to be a better way to do this than what I typically would do. So what I did was I thought, this health curriculum is not that complicated, but I don't know if I have the time for planning. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually have the students kind of pair into groups, go into groups, and then they're going to take a chunk of the curriculum and they're going to learn it and they're going to teach each other. Not only going to teach each other, they're going to do assessments, they're going to go through this process. And I will tell you, that was probably one of the best classes I've ever taught in my K-12 teaching experience. And, I had, the kids knew the content inside out because they had to teach it to others. One of my favorite quotes ever is from Joseph Joubert is to teach is to learn twice. But they also were pushing each other to really kind of grow in the way that they were teaching. They wanted to make it as dynamic, engaging a session as possible. And students just did amazingly well in that class. And weirdly enough, way less time for me for planning, for teaching. And, I kind of smartly said, you're gonna have to do the assessments. Kids did incredible in that class. And they were so excited because they had ownership that I guided them through the process, but I didn't tell them what to do. They kind of had to figure it out themselves. And I think when you look at what's the benefit to me, the kids, first of all, were super excited, way less time, way deeper learning. No teacher is going to say that's a bad thing. So I think sometimes when we can actually focus, now I would not do this with every single class, but when there's opportunities to do this, there's something really powerful. I didn't write this in the newsletter. I had technology in my title as well at that time. And basically, if you have tech in your title, people look at you in education. They're like, yeah, can you fix my electricity? Like basically anything with electricity is now your problem. And I remember someone came to me and said, hey, my computer's broke. I'm like, I don't want to do this. And one of the students said, I'll do it, Mr. Couros. I'm like, oh, he could totally do it. So we actually built a Apple Genius Bar in our schools where the students ran it and they did it. And they were so excited because they took care of each other. And here's the beautiful thing. I know this is going to make me sound old. Do you remember when keys used to be switched around in those keyboards and kids would mess with you? That stopped immediately. And why did it stop? Because my buddy who has to fix it is sitting right beside me like, don't do that. Spend all the time fixing it. When there's ownership over the process, you're more excited about the results. So I that's something I just want to share. So the second one I want to share with you was that as administrator, and I said, turning your spotlight onto your staff. And I shared this in Forward Together. And here's a quote that I shared from the book. Ownership is more about feeling pride in sharing success about something you created together. It has to do with personal responsibility and care over a particular idea, task, or result. To feel ownership, not only do individuals need to believe in the ideas to participate, they must believe their participation is integral to the success of the idea or initiative. Here's what I did with the administration. We needed to focus on some initiatives as a professional learning team. And, here's the mentality in education. Hey, let's find somebody who can help us with this. We'll pay them some money, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I think it's really beneficial to bring outsiders into your organization. They give you some different perspectives. And obviously, I'm biased because that's what I do. But I think we rely on that too much. I think you have to find that balance of how do you develop leadership? How do you really develop the people in your organization while also tapping to outsider perspectives? When you can do that, that's something that really becomes powerful. So when I went through this process, instead of bringing someone in, I'm like, basically we have experts in this building right now. So I said, here are the 3 initiatives that I have figured out that we're going to have to focus on. And I want you to challenge me to think, do we need to focus on any of these? So I'm not saying I went through all the data, I went through all the information, And based on what the school district is asking us to do, here are the 3. Do you want to challenge any of these? And the interesting thing was my staff challenged me and said, we agree with those 3. We actually need a 4th though. And I was like, okay, I'm okay with that. So when we decided the 4 as a school community, people decided which one was their strength, which one they were most excited about. And they joined that team. I didn't say you have to go have 10 per team. I just said, where is your passion? Where is your strength? And they went there. And what the staff did was they led the PD. They created it. Again, they measured it to be successful. Now, you want staff to hit your measures. When they make them, they're more likely to hit them because now there's an ownership over that process. That ownership is so crucial. And we had such incredible professional learning. And it was really interesting because when you talk about the idea of innovating outside the box, there's a certain amount of money that we had for professional learning. And what did I spend that on? Food for our staff, really having welcoming days. And, we actually had like an abundance of money that we can spend on other things as well because of the way that we leverage our own staff. But the most important aspect was the idea that you can't be a prophet in your own land. When people say that, I think it's something I really struggle with because why are we so apprehensive to acknowledge the gifts of the people across the hall? We covet people across the world and we kind of crap on people in our own school communities. And what was really fascinating is that you knew like, oh, there's like 15 people on that team. I can ask any one of them. They started to see the expertise beyond the classroom. And the best leaders I ever had made me feel that my impact as a teacher was way beyond my classroom only. It was impacting the entire school. And I wrote this as kind of a takeaway. You do not succeed as a leader because you are better than everyone. You succeed as a leader because you make everyone better. Everyone grew through that process because they had the ownership to do so. And so the final one I do want to share with you is turning the spotlight onto other professionals. As someone who I don't like to say I'm a content creator. I'm just someone who learns and shares my ideas. But I've used the space, whether it's my blog, podcast, whatever, to share my ideas. But I also see really great stuff. And what I try to do is highlight those people to maybe perhaps give them an audience that might not know their work. I actually own a publishing company. I'm Impress. I'm part owner of that as well. And as much as we have new authors, I love sharing their books. And that's something I'm really proud of because we put a great deal of attention into sharing those books. But I also, this is true. You might not know this. Other people who have books for other companies, I share their stuff too. And the reason I think that matters is because there's space for everyone to be successful. It is frustrating when someone doesn't want to help you because they're like, well, if I share yours, then what about mine? And I don't think it's ever hurt me, to be honest with you. Again, going back to this notion, when I share other people's stuff because I think it's good, I think that helps education overall. And weirdly enough, it kind of gives me credibility through this process. And I wrote this in the email. I believe that lifting others up will never lessen your impact. In fact, it often elevates your work, as what you put into the world is often returned in abundance. I think the other part that I do want to share with this is I know sometimes if I want to help other people, because I know sometimes it sucks when I feel like I don't get helped or people aren't, sharing my stuff. And there's a notion of like, well, other people share it, so why should I? But if everyone believed that, no one's going to share your stuff. And so I know how it feels when people, don't support my work because maybe maybe insecurity, maybe they don't like, if they don't like it, that's a totally different thing. But if they enjoy it, but they don't want to share it, that's something I really struggle with. Cause I think if it's great, we want to get it out there. So instead of saying, well, other people don't share my stuff, so I'm not going to share theirs. I think, I really hate when people don't support my work. So I'm going to be the opposite of what I hate. That matters to me. So I think when you have that opportunity to share the spotlight onto others, it never makes you look bad. If anything, it makes you look good. So I just want to share those 3 things with you. And I know that if you made it this far, listen to the podcast, thanks so much. And really appreciate it. If you made it this far, like and subscribe. I know I never say that. I'm supposed to say it at the beginning. I never say that. But yeah, and if you enjoyed it, but maybe some takeaways. Also, the newsletter where I wrote some of these ideas down is there as well. But here's a little a side takeaway too. I mean, if you remember at the beginning of this podcast, I didn't want to do it. I was like anxious, and then now it's over, and I'm glad I did. One of the things I've learned over the years is if you don't want to do something that you committed to doing, just do it for 5 minutes. And if you don't feel like doing it after 5 minutes, quit. But typically when you do the 5 minutes, you finish. And I did that today, so good example. And I wasn't planning on saying that, but yeah, I'm glad I created this because it made me feel better. So thanks for being here and guiding me through this. But thanks for all you do. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.